Yo, what's going on, college football fans? Welcome back to the First and Long College Football Show. I am your co-host, as always, and joined by my co-host Mason. We have got the Week 8 Top 25 ranking coming out here. We are going to talk about some of the Week 8 matchups that we've got coming up. It's going to be another awesome weekend in college football. Go figure, right? Water wet, fire hot. College football, really entertaining, and super excited. It's going to be another really good weekend. The big matchups, we all know what's coming up. We got Alabama, Tennessee, we got Georgia, Texas, and much, much more. But first, we're going to jump into our top 25 and give you our updated ranking here. And guys, we're creeping ever so closely to the college football ranking coming out. And when we do that, we're going to have a college football playoff ranking and all that good stuff. And we'll kind of change this up a bit. But here for the last couple of weeks, we're going to go with the top 25. And so this week is no different. And it'll right after, it's always Halloween. Right after Halloween, we start worrying about college football playoff rankings, projections, all that stuff. Mason, how you doing, man? It was a long night. Great football in week 7. We broke it all down. We reacted to it there on the reaction show. If you missed it, go check it out. That was a lot of fun last night. How are you today, man?
Doing good, man. We got another jam-packed week ahead of us, so we are trying to get out ahead of it and let you guys know what's coming up. We've got a lot of good football to talk about. We've updated our top 25. These things keep getting harder and harder to make, but
Yeah.
we're excited to bring it to you, let you know what our opinions are, and hear what you guys have to say. We actually do take into account your opinion on our top 25 to some degree. And we like to hear what you guys have to say about not only your teams, but also just the big teams and the big games and how these things should be affecting the college football top 25. Soon, as Mark said, we'll be into our top 12, and that'll be really exciting. But who knows how that's going to turn out? We've got a few more games to play before we get there. Excited to break this one down with you, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. We got people in the comment section. TriStar already throwing his Tennessee, Alabama projection out there. He says it's the Hillbillies versus the Rednecks. We got Siegs over there in the comment section. TriStar also said Georgia 35-31. Um,
Love hearing
uh,
that.
I love to hear it. It's a fantastic idea. I hope that as a Georgia fan, it comes to fruition. I don't know.
Yeah.
Georgia, a slight underdog right the second. Siegs in the comment section went to Pigeon Forge over the weekend. Them Rocky Top people are a different breed of Appalachian rednecks. Well, there might be a little bit of truth to that. Uh, but we love our Appalachian rednecks up there. My dad went to college up in Tennessee, so I've heard all the stories. I believe me, I've heard all the craziness that goes on up in the Tennessee hills, and some of it pretty unique to Tennessee there. So unique part of the country, no doubt. All right, let's jump into our top 25. Thank y'all so much for watching and commenting. We do appreciate it. You guys do me a favor, hit the like button so we can get the word out on the First and Long College Football Show here. We could certainly use the help. All right, let's do this thing, Mason. We're going to do the list a little bit different today. We're not going to drag this thing way out. Here's 25 through 11, guys. And here's where we're at with the top 25 right now. There is nobody in our top 25 other than Vanderbilt, because they're special, that have 2 losses. Everybody in this top 25 at this point has 0 losses or 1 loss. So I feel like that's important to say, because this is a ranking. This isn't a power rating. This isn't necessarily who we think, 24 isn't necessarily beating 25 and 20 ain't necessarily beating 21 here on this list. That's not how we're looking at this. And this is not the way that I think things are going to end up. There's some teams on here that are, this is a funky looking bunch of teams here. I mean, you got your Tennessee, your Notre Dames, your teams, that you kind of figured would be in this kind of area. Kansas State, Texas A&M, right? We kind of thought in the preseason, then we kind of backed away from it. Now we're back on it. But BYU, big surprise, right? Syracuse, big surprise. SMU, Pitt undefeated. Pitt is undefeated. I mean, we're at a point in this world where we got to talk to our children about an undefeated Pitt. Okay, and sitting right there in the tall weeds in the ACC. By the way, Syracuse really as well, I guess. Illinois, not a team we talked about in the preseason. Army at 22nd. I implore you all to go look at Army and what they're doing with that offense and just with that team in general right now. Absolutely kicking people's ass. And they every bit deserve to be in here. We got Navy at number 24. This is a mosh podge of teams that nobody would have had a chance in hell at betting would be in this top 25 in week 8 of the college football season. But this is where we at. And look, I don't make the records for the teams, right? I just give you a spin on it on the internet here. Uh, Indiana kind of, I guess you could kind of say, king of the misfit toys here. They're in a big matchup this week. It's going to be one that we're going to talk about against Nebraska. Just kind of in a, in quick thoughts, I guess you could say, Mason. What do you think about 11 through 25? I didn't even really mention Tennessee kind of sliding down. They've slowly slid down the list. This was a team that we had in the top 4 for a lot, a good portion of the early part of the season, and they keep sliding down a little bit. And 11 is not a bad spot to be by any means, but it's kind of just what we had to do with the loss to obviously Arkansas. The offense hasn't looked great at this point. So each team has kind of got their little situation going on. What do you think about this group?
Well, I mean, I think first of all, when you're talking about the lower portion of the top 25, a lot of times who you keep out is more important than who you have in. No Ole Miss on this top 25, y'all. As Mark started, kind of led in with, they're a 2-loss team and they didn't make the cut. Now, do I think Ole Miss ends up in the top 25 by the end of the year? Absolutely. I
Yeah.
absolutely do. I think they had a real opportunity to beat LSU last night, and obviously the game went to overtime, but couldn't get it done, couldn't hold on there for the win. But as of right now, when you look at Ole Miss's wins, it does not stack up against other teams' wins. And I think that's the big point that we're trying to drive home here. Ole Miss has not, they've lost both of their big games so far this year. Um,
Yep.
that says something, and they look like the better team in both of those games. That also says something to me. So no Ole Miss in this one. Vanderbilt does it again, stuns Kentucky this week as a 13.5-point underdog. They end up winning in convincing fashion, look like the better team the entire game. They're definitely a team on the rise, and a team that we said last night could be undefeated right now. They kind of had a couple of bonehead weeks there, lost a couple of games that they probably shouldn't have. And now I mean, now's the time to buy Vandy stock if you hadn't already. So we got 2 service academy teams in there, Navy and Army. Army looks like, I mean, they're 6-0 so far against the spread this year, 6-0 in general. But they're not just winning games; they're also beating the spread. They're a bit of a wagon right now. They've got Notre Dame lurking at the end of the season here, but for right now, Army looks like a really good team led by Jeff Monken, Todd Monken's brother there, and you can tell based off of the offense that he knows what he's doing there. Nebraska, they got a tough matchup this week. Interested to see what they're going to end up doing, this week. But so far, they've got number 16 IU this week. If you don't know, but so far Nebraska has looked like a much better team under Matt Rule. This year, things are starting to click. Dylan Raiola is still a freshman. He's making freshman mistakes, but you can see the potential there for this team. Couple him with Isaiah Nayor, who's having a fantastic year, and a solid defense. And boy, it's gonna be a fun matchup between them and IU. I cannot wait to break that down with you, Mark. Boise State survives against Hawaii. It looked like a close game at first, and they kind of pull away late. Thanks to none other than the Heisman leader, Ashton Jeanty. He is absolutely phenomenal, and he's a big reason why Boise State is as high as they are on this list. Kansas State, they're looking like possibly the best team in the Big 12. Though I think BYU will have something to say about that. Really took Colorado down to the wire, or Colorado took Kansas State down to the wire, however you want to say that. But it was a close matchup last night, and they ended up winning on a big touchdown pass at the end of the game. And they've been very formidable this year. And all of a sudden, Notre Dame kind of looks like they're back into the college football playoff race here. They've not just been winning, but they've been winning convincingly. The NIU loss just looks terrible, on their resume. But the good thing is that game came so early. That loss came so early in the season. We were wondering if they would get back into the college football playoff hunt. Needed a lot of teams ahead of them to start losing, which they have. And all of a sudden, Notre Dame's kind of back in this thing. So really exciting to see that. We've got a small breakdown of them this week. They've got Georgia Tech. That is definitely going to be a test for them. But with their defense, I think that they will handle that pretty easily. And yeah, like you said, Tennessee sliding a little bit, but definitely a team at 11 that has potential to climb back into the top 10 with the playmakers that they have on offense and defense. Just kind of got caught up in a rivalry game this week and took a Florida team to overtime and ended up coming out with the W. And that's what matters, right? So interesting 11 through 25, but that's all I got for this one.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Ole Miss. Like I said, they had to drop up out of here. I mean, they lost a third of their games this season, and they haven't beat anybody. So, it was tough for me to take Ole Miss from top 10-ish to out of the ranking. But, I mean, we're at a point in the season where if you've lost a third of your football games, you don't belong in the top 25, do you? Unless you lost both games to Georgia and Texas, or Alabama and Texas, or Oregon and Texas, or something like that, and in that case, but that's not the case here. You lose to LSU and you lose to South Carolina. I mean, to Kentucky. So this year, I'm getting Kentucky and South Carolina mixed up in my head a lot, and I don't even know why, really. All right, let's go through the top 10 here. That's what everybody wants to see. Faked you out. It's 10 through 6. Number 10, we got Alabama. Look, through all the hoopla and all the, the negativity that's going on with Alabama, I mean, Alabama's still right where they want to be. Now, they had to slide down the rankings some because of their poor performance over the last couple of weeks. But look, I'm gonna tell you something. Any team that wins, and I'm not saying Alabama's winning the national championship, but I'm saying any team that goes on a journey to win a national championship is going to go through lulls, and you're going to have to have a game or two where you get lucky. And Alabama is lucky just in the fact that this year is a 12-team playoff, because if you lose to Vanderbilt in any normal year with a 14 playoff, the odds of you going to that 14 playoff are slim to none at that point. But that's not the case with Alabama. I mean, I saw where Paul Feinbaum said Alabama's definitely not a college football playoff team. Well, I don't know how you can honestly say that with a straight face whenever you sit there and look at the roster, and it's one of the most talented rosters in all the country. Now, are they undisciplined right now? Are they having issues? Yeah, it certainly seems that way from the outside looking in. But I'm not writing Alabama off. Who's writing Alabama off at this point? There's just absolutely no way. They've lost one game, and yeah, it was to Vanderbilt. But let's be honest, this is the best Vanderbilt team we've seen in 20 years at least. Right? Or at least since James Franklin was there. But even when James Franklin was there, he wasn't beating Alabama. He wasn't beating Kentucky even at that point. I mean, maybe he was that season. I don't know.
He did beat Georgia. But that was a 2016 Georgia rebuild team, but nonetheless.
Yeah. I remember it well. It was homecoming in Athens, and it was Kirby's first year. Yeah, for sure. Let's see. Who's AGS? Chris Cobb, thank you so much for commenting. AGS 45, Mississippi State 10. Who's AGS? Am I missing something?
Ags, Texas A&M.
Oh, he's saying Texas A&M Ags. I got you. That makes sense. Okay, yeah, that is a game this week. And we're going to talk about that game on Tuesday, by the way. Come join us on the live show. That'll be one that we do talk about a bit. Thank you, TriStar. I see that now. I understand what he was going for there now. I just don't ever refer to him as Ags. I always refer to him as A&M or ATM whatever you want to call it. All right, LSU at number 9. Look, LSU had a huge win this week. LSU is turning a corner. They're figuring out their identity. We talked about that last night. This is the point in the season where teams start to really figure out their identity. LSU, we knew, was an offensive-led football team, but Garrett Nussmeier is a leader on this football team that's tried by fire at this point. He has been in the fire. He's been in the flames. I think this team it's really tough for a new quarterback to come in whenever you haven't started and just to be a leader all of a sudden. I don't care that he's been in the system for years, blah, 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 whatever, been at LSU for a while. Until you're out there on the field, you can't lead a football team from the sideline as a player. That's never going to happen. And especially, obviously LSU was just amazing last year, or at least their offense was. I think LSU's figuring out an identity right now. And I think their defense is taking baby steps in the right direction. They did a great job of keeping everything in front of them against Ole Miss yesterday. And that's exactly what we talked about in the preview. LSU was never going to shut down Ole Miss. This defense isn't a shutdown defense, but I think they are a bend don't break style defense. And not to mention, they were feeling themselves at the end of that football game last night. That defense was all over Jackson Dart, sacked him 6 times in that football game. That was one of the best defensive games that we've seen out of LSU in years. I don't think anybody really realized that or really thought about that, but it was something I was thinking about this morning. We have not seen LSU play that good defensively in years now. So watch out, because I'm telling you right now, LSU gets healthy on offense, they're going to be hell to deal with. They will be hell to deal with. Now, they can't run the ball that well, but they got wide receivers that are hurt right now, and then whenever they come back, it's going to be pretty crazy. Clemson at number 8, they get better, I think, throughout the season. Clemson, it feels like their team has got a little bit of momentum. It feels like the players are buying in ways that they haven't the last couple of years for Clemson. Dabo seems to be kind of doing like some old Dabo things down there. And if you watch their games right now, it seems like Clemson's having a lot of fun. And that's something that I can't really say, honestly, for Georgia. I feel like Georgia's not having that much fun playing football this year. I'm just going to be honest. It doesn't seem like they're having that much fun. Go watch Clemson. It seems like they're having a ball out there. Now, Georgia has been really serious. It seems like really business-like every time they showed up at a game this year. Everybody's got their different styles, and, whatever. Clemson looks like a good team. They got a really good chance to win the ACC this season. Miami, maybe peaked too early, like that kid in high school that, was a foot taller than everybody and had a beard in 9th grade. Peaked too early, man. Now that guy looks like he's 60. Miami, I don't know. I'm interested to see what the last half of the season looks like for this team. It is really hard to ride at a really high level all season. And like I said, if you're going to win a championship, you're going to have valleys, and you've got to have leaders on the football team to be able to get you through those valleys, and you got to be able to forget about them real quick. So we'll see. We'll see with Miami, who we're going to talk about here in just a minute. Iowa State at 7. Iowa State, the hardest games on their schedule are at the end of it. So we're going to see what Iowa State's all about. But they're undefeated. This is where we're at. I mean, they haven't played that hard of a schedule, but we got to respect the fact that they're undefeated. I like Matt Campbell as a coach. Brock Beck there at quarterback has been really, really good. Iowa State's tough to deal with in the Big 12, and don't look now, but everybody else in the Big 12 has already been tripped up pretty much, minus BYU. So we got them at the 7th spot, and they're the highest-ranked Big 12 team. Georgia at number 6. Georgia's kind of hanging in there. They're about to be tested this week. This is a different-looking Georgia team than what we've seen over the last few years, guys. So, it's a lot different. Georgia threw the ball like 50 times this past weekend. I mean, this is just a lot different football team than what Georgia has seen over the last few years. Where does it lead by the end of the season? I'd be lying to you if I said I knew. But this Georgia team makes me a nervous wreck. I don't have near as much confidence in this Georgia team as the ones I've had in years past. And that's just kind of a fact right now. What do you think about 6 through 10? We're going to see a few of these teams play some really big games this week, and we're about to break them down a little bit, or at least give you our early thoughts. What do you think about this group?
Well, yeah, starting where you left off at 6, Georgia gets really tested against Mississippi State this past week. Georgia, probably goes into that game thinking, yeah, we'll put up some big points in the first half, and then score early in the third quarter, and then we'll get some second team in. We'll get some defenders in there to get their beak wet, and that wasn't the case. They win by 10 against Mississippi State, gave up like 30 points to Mississippi State. It's a crazy game, and Georgia just doesn't really look like you said, the team that we've seen of old. Doesn't look like the preseason #1 team at this point. They really look like a 9-3 team by the end of the year based on the schedule that they have. But we'll see
Yeah,
if they
tough
win this
schedule.
week. If they win this week at Austin, they're back in there. They're back as a national playoff or national championship contender. Right now, I think that they're kind of on that A tier, just outside of the S tier here for this year so far. Iowa State, look, that they got to keep going. I picked them to lose this past week against West Virginia. They got the job done and won against the spread. They're a team that just proves doubters wrong, and they've been doing that all season long. They're going to continue to do that until the end of the year, I think, when they've got Utah and Kansas State at the end of the season. And then who knows? Maybe they win those games too. You never know with this Cyclones team. I think that year 2 under this new coaching staff, they've got things rolling, and I really like what they're doing there. Clemson, like you said, they're a team on the rise. Ever since the Georgia loss, they've been getting better and better week after week. The offense is clicking. They kind of slowed. They kind of came out slow against Wake Forest in that first quarter, and then really got things going there in the middle 2 quarters, and kind of sat at the end of the game, kept people healthy and whatnot. But really like where Clemson's going. You're absolutely right. They are an ACC contender, especially with the way Miami seems to progressed in the past couple of weeks, playing a couple of close games there. But really like where Clemson's at right now. LSU, huge win against Ole Miss, goes to overtime. Didn't expect anything less in this football game because these are 2 really good teams between LSU and Ole Miss. It kind of felt like Ole Miss was the better team throughout the game, but you saw Garrett Nussmeier make plays late with his arm, make some plays and rolled out with his legs, avoided some pressure and whatnot. He just looks like one of the most gutsy quarterbacks in the SEC right now. Really like his game and what he's been able to do with those receivers. Got to get the run game involved, like you said, on the offensive side of the football. The defense, I think, has gotten marginally better week in and week out, and now they're playing pretty. They're playing effectively. It seemed like Harold Perkins finally kind of came back to life. They kind of revived him on coming off the edge there, and the defensive line is now swarming to the football. It's really fun to watch the progression of this Tigers team, and they're definitely a team to watch in the SEC moving forward.
Brian
Alabama,
Kelly. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just yeah. So Alabama, real quick, is a team that I've got back here on my shelf somewhere. Like they are up on the shelf. Not getting them down for a little bit. I don't know. I don't know what to make of this Alabama team because they are a team that can play at the highest of highs and the lowest of lows this year. They seem very undisciplined as a team. They seem very poorly coached right now, I would say, for the talent that's on this team. It's really mind-boggling what they really haven't done this season so far, other than beat Georgia. That was a really impressive win, and it's really the only thing holding them into the top 10 right now. But yeah, Alabama definitely on the downslide. I would not be surprised if they don't make the college football playoffs. We didn't have them in our college football playoffs at the beginning of the year, anyways. But at this point, it seems like things are worse than we could have even imagined.
It just seems like the attitude around the program isn't very good right now. I mean, obviously the fan base is pretty negative right this second. Alabama has played 10 bad quarters in a row, and that I think is where the frustration lies. And look, I'm going to put Georgia right there in the same. Georgia has played bad in 60% of the quarters they've played this year too. So it's really tough to figure out what's going on with these football teams. Now, what's going on at Georgia and what's going on in Alabama, I think they're two different things. Don't get me wrong. Don't get it twisted. But I don't know, man. Alabama, it seems like they've taken the player-led thing a little too far, and it seems like the players are running the team rather than the coaches, in my opinion. And we'll see how that kind of comes to fruition throughout the season. Um, LSU, I just wanted to say one more thing. Brian Kelly hired Blake Baker and has completely just given him the reins to the defense. I watched that game very closely, especially the last quarter and then the overtime there. Brian Kelly has literally no input at all on the defense. He doesn't say anything while the defense is on the field. He goes up to Blake Baker after the defensive series is over. They say 5 words to one another, and that's it. Brian Kelly, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. Brian Kelly is focused on the offense, helping a new play caller there on the offense. I saw it last night. Brian Kelly sitting there on the sideline. Offense goes out on the field. He's saying, "Run it, run it, run it, run it, run it." I can read his lips. And then what do they do? Well, run it. He has an input on the offense. Blake Baker's running this defense. I think that's the best possible scenario for this LSU team. Blake Baker may be a head coach one day, but right now, I think he's just a hell of a defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
1 through 5. Oregon is number 1 for obvious reasons here. Look, and for anybody that feels like Texas should be number 1, I mean, I don't want to take anything away from Texas. I'm wearing the Georgia shirt. Any Texas fan that sees this is going to say, "Oh, he's just a hater." Well, no, I'm trying to be objective here. Texas hasn't beat anybody yet, guys. I mean, I know that they're really good. I know that Texas is really good. I have 2 eyeballs. I can see that. I've watched years of football. Okay. I can see that Texas is good. They have not played an offense with a pulse yet. They haven't played an offense that's top 60 in total offense yet this season. Okay. So that is what it is. And that has led to the fact that Texas hasn't played in big games, as many big games as Oregon has. Oregon just beat Ohio State. That's obvious. We all just watched it. Fantastic football game, by the way. That we just watched a college football playoff game in October, essentially, is what we just did. But what's Texas's biggest win right now? Is it Michigan or is it Oklahoma? And I don't think anybody can honestly tell me because I don't know who would win between Michigan and Oklahoma, man. I really don't. So with that being said, Oregon clearly has better wins than Texas does at this point. Texas hasn't been in a dogfight yet, and that's kudos to Texas. They've played amazing football so far this season, done everything they're supposed to do, but they have not been in a dogfight yet, and it is coming. I don't know when it's going to be. Maybe it's, pun intended, when the dogs roll into town. I don't know, but right now it's very clear to me that Oregon deserves to be number 1, at least for the time being. Now, Penn State at number 3. Do I really think Penn State is the 3rd best football team in America? No, not really. But how can you disprove that? Is kind of my point. We all have these preconceived notions in our head when the season starts of where a team should be. I'm trying to just let that go out one of my ears here because I want to put the best teams where they deserve to be. And Penn State was in a dogfight this weekend against the Trojans. It seemed early in the week, we looked at the line. We thought Penn State would win that game easily. We talked about it on the Thursday betting show. We said, whoa, 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 hold up. This is going to be a good ball game. And lo and behold, it was. I don't think USC is as bad as what a lot of people think they are. And that's hard to say because they've been like this. They've been inconsistent. They've been good some weeks and really bad some weeks. I think you got the best version of USC this past weekend, and I think we saw the best version of Penn State. I think that's the best version of what we're going to get from Penn State. Maybe the defense can play a little better, but the offense, I mean, good Lord gave them lemons. They're making lemonade with it, okay? They got a tight end lining up at center, going out for passes. They're doing any and everything they can to generate points on offense, and so far this season, it has worked. Penn State has scored more points this season and has looked a little bit better on offense and has been willing to try some new things. Did it fit well on Drew Aller last night? You know, not necessarily. He threw a bunch of interceptions, so that'll be something to clean up. But um, anyway, Penn State's a good football team. Are they great? I think that's still undecided. Miami at number 4. Miami hasn't been tested either. Now we're getting to a point in the season where Miami hasn't been tested, but they haven't lost a game. So what am I to do with them? I think they're pretty good. I think they got a chance to be really good, but we haven't seen like an amazing matchup for them. Although we have seen them have to come back from the depths, have to come back from a big deficit, and we saw them scratch and claw against Virginia Tech, come back from a deficit in that football game. This team's got a lot of fight, and they have been somewhat battle tested, even if some of the teams they were tested against weren't top 25 teams necessarily. I think Miami's pretty good. That's eye test. They don't have wins that just prove that without having to, you know, go into this whole spill. But I think they're pretty good, and we're going to find out this last half of the season what Miami's really about. And Ohio State at number 5. I didn't have the heart to drop Ohio State any farther than this, to be honest with you. Um, and it's something we didn't talk about in the reaction show last night, Mason. Jeremiah Smith was a big reason that Ohio State kind of stumbles at the end of that football game. I mean, he played an amazing game, but the offensive pass interference that was blatant, by the way, it wasn't a bogus call or anything like that. But when he goes out and he shoves the cornerback 7 yards backwards and then catches that pass and backs Ohio State up out of field goal range, that's on him. That wasn't on Will Howard, and I didn't agree with Will Howard what he did at the end of that football game. But my whole point in this is a freshman made a freshman mistake in that football game. It cost Ohio State the game. And that's how these types of games go. And that's why I say it was like a playoff game. I mean, it was margin of error was very thin in this football game. And Oregon won more moments than Ohio State did. And I think both teams are really, really good. I think both teams absolutely will be in the playoff at the end of the season. What do you think about the top 5? I'm trying to talk faster and get all this information out without taking too long, but easier said than done.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's picking up where you left off with Ohio State. We did see Jeremiah Smith get the penalty. It was a freshman mistake. That it was the first freshman mistake that I've seen him make all year, and that's just a credit to him. It came at the worst possible moment. He still had an incredible game. He's still probably the best wide receiver in college football for my money, and he's gonna be absolutely fun to watch as the games go on. I think that there's a good chance that Ohio State and Oregon play at least one more time, if not twice. I think that both of these teams are clearly the best in the Big Ten. I would be really surprised if they're not playing one another in the Big Ten championship game, and then potentially later on in the season. I mean, I would not, I would not be upset with the Ohio State Oregon national championship game with what we saw last night. I think that would be extremely fun to watch and an extremely fun storyline. Miami at 4. Miami's been one of those Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde teams. They were very good the first 4 games of the season. Past 2 games, they have struggled to put away some mediocre ACC opponents. Not sure what we're going to get this week. They've got another test with Louisville coming up, but I do know that's going to be a pretty fun game. Game is in Louisville, by the way, so a lot of pressure there on Cam Ward once again, but he's a guy who has been cool, calm, and collected under pressure so far this season. I don't expect that to change this year or this week. Penn State at number 3, like you said, that we don't think Penn State's the number 3 team in the country, but they are just plugging along and winning. We've said all season that with Penn State's schedule, it's going to be tough to keep them out of the college football playoff. No Michigan on the schedule, no Oregon on the schedule, if I'm not mistaken. No, they do get Ohio State, so that's going to be a fun matchup to watch. But I feel like Ohio State at this point is much better than Penn State. I think that's one that they're going to win. But really, you look at Penn State's schedule, and from the beginning of the year, we're looking at it and saying, yeah, it looks like an 11-1 season for them. They're probably going to be in the college football playoff. So get used to seeing them in the top 10, whether you think they deserve to be from a power rating or not. But I'll say all of that and then caveat that to say that that was a really impressive win against USC. A lot of models, we had talked about this last night. A lot of models were saying that Penn State would win by less than 1 point, and they beat. Well, they didn't beat the spread, but they beat that at least. They won by 3. Could have been an upset, waiting to happen, but they got it done. They showed some grit and got it done.
That
There,
line was a nasty little trick played on everybody by Vegas, is what that
yeah,
was. That was a
yeah.
nasty little trick that Vegas pulled on everybody because I know what everybody betted. It was Penn State. I know they did. I saw where the money was going, and that was a nasty little trick.
Yeah, and Penn State, they found a way to win. So I think having them in the top 5 is warranted. We'll see where they drop after they face Ohio State, and I think get exposed after that game. But we'll have to wait and see after that game gets played. Texas at number 2. I think you got it right here, Mark. Oregon at 1, Texas at 2. Oregon's got the better win over Ohio State. Texas does not have a top 10 win at this point in the season. And I just I think Texas is really, really good. I think that they are probably the best team in the country right now as far as what they've put on film from a power rating perspective. But they got to beat Georgia this week. If they beat Georgia this week, I think that Texas goes to number 1, just based on what we've
Oh
seen,
yeah.
how they've performed in games that they should win, and how they've performed against. I think as an underdog against Georgia this week, if I'm not mistaken. So anyways, Texas could be back at number 1 after this week. I would not be surprised in the least. But Oregon gets the flowers this week. Huge win against Ohio State. I think that Dan Lanning, this was the biggest win for him so far this year, so far in his career, I should say. And Oregon, I mean, they had to play a really good game, and they did. Everything was really clicking for them for the most part, and also they did this without Jordan Birch. Really their best
Mm-hmm.
defensive lineman. He's not there for this game, and they were still able to get pressure on Will Howard. I thought it was a really complete performance by Oregon, and one that they'll have to replicate moving forward if they're going to win the Big Ten.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There you have it, folks. There's our top 25 for week 8, or headed into the week 8 of college football here in 2024. I like where we're at with the top 10. I think we're pretty much on. Maybe you could argue one or the other moves around. Let us know in the comment section. We'd love to hear it. Thank you all so much for watching. Um, all right, let's jump into some of these early look aheads for some of these football games. Our initial thoughts, however you want to put it. We'll read some of these comments here real quick before we get into it. Jonathan Miller, if Texas beats Georgia, are they then for sure number 1? Jonathan, I the only other thing, yeah, I mean, I don't see any other scenario in which they aren't. Um, I don't see any scenario in which they aren't, honestly. And look, I mean, if Texas beats Georgia this weekend, depending on how the football game goes, I guess, uh, I think Texas will be a lot of people's favorite to win the national championship at that point. Um, Texas, this is a big hump in the road for them this season, and they're going to have to finish up the season there at Texas, with Texas A&M. I believe that's at Kyle Field. We were talking about that in the comment section. You know, this is one of the big speed humps for Texas this season, and obviously for Georgia as well, going on the road to Austin. But Texas, I think this will tell us a lot about this football team. The problem with Texas is, like I said, they haven't played an offense yet. They've played some defenses, and I was very impressed with what Texas did against Oklahoma this past weekend. Rocky start. I told everybody on the show, or anybody that would listen, that Oklahoma's got a hell of a defense. It wasn't going to be just some blasting out of a cannon, scoring touchdowns over the top over and over. I mean, that was never going to be the situation in the first half of that game. Texas did a great job running the football. That's what is going to be a key to their football game this weekend coming up with Texas. Jonathan Miller also says, I expect Texas versus Texas A&M to be a 1-3 Texas versus a 7-9 A&M team. I don't know what that means. Oh, he's talking about rankings. 1-3 Texas versus 7 to. I mean, We're going to talk about the Georgia Texas breakdown here in a second, so I won't spoil my thoughts on it. But um, here was an interesting question: would Boise State be favored to beat Michigan or Oklahoma? I think they'd be favored to beat both of them at this point. Now it depends on where that football game's played. Now, if it's played in the Big House or at Oklahoma, I mean, maybe that's a pretty thin line there, um, or maybe even a pick 'em. I don't know, but Boise State, they got a pretty good football team this year. And I was slow to jump on the Boise State train or whatnot, but I think they're pretty doggone good. Okay, let's jump into some of these breakdowns here. And Mason, didn't even. Oh, you made the banners.
Yeah, I just did that while you were talking.
All right, cool. Georgia at Texas. It's an SEC matchup in Austin, Texas. The Bulldogs will go on the road. Texas favored by 3.5. Over under set at 54.5. Texas, of course, coming off the big rivalry win against Oklahoma. Georgia coming off what looked like a dominant victory for a decent portion of the game, and then kind of decided to let Mississippi State jump back in that football game and had some, I don't know, I guess you'd say breaks on defense that allowed Mississippi State to hit some big plays at the end of that football game. I fully agree with Texas being favored here, especially with this game being played in Austin. I think this game comes down to some pretty simple football stuff. It's going to be lines of scrimmage. Right now, I think Texas has the clear advantage on the line of scrimmage against Georgia in this football game. And honestly, as we kind of break this game down further into the week, we're going to do it on our Tuesday live show. So come join us live on Tuesday evening. But I think Texas has got the advantage in a lot of areas in this football game. I think Georgia, the defense has not played their best football yet. And I think this is probably one of those opportunities where Kirby Smart gets this defense ready to play in this football game. The over-under set at 54.5, so you can kind of do the math in your head there. Vegas isn't expecting necessarily a barn burner back and forth, but I kind of disagree with that. I think there's going to be a pretty good bit of scoring in this football game. I'm considering the over already. Look, we don't. This Texas defense they're not tested. They're not battle tested yet. That was our biggest question about Texas going into the season. It wasn't offensively with their offensive mastermind as head coach, right? It was defensively. Can Texas take some of the steps in the right direction defensively to move closer to winning a championship, and in this case, an SEC championship? And that defense is still not exactly tested. One of the biggest areas that we talked about Texas's defense and not being tested was some of the newer guys that are on the defensive line. We watched a couple of first-round talents leave off that defensive line last year in the middle, go to the NFL. They were absolutely unbelievable at stopping the run last season, average giving up 75 yards a game on the ground. Those guys are gone, and we haven't seen anybody be able to test the defensive line of Texas. And unfortunately, I'm not so sure that Georgia is the team that's going to be able to test that. Georgia's not much of a run team at this point, and it seems like Georgia has kind of accepted that thought process as Georgia threw the ball 50 times against Mississippi State. Now, I don't know exactly what to make of that. I don't think Georgia's ever going to just give up on the run necessarily, but it's not the best running back room that we've seen for Georgia. The offensive line has been shuffled around the last couple of weeks. Tate Ratledge, there's been rumors he's coming back. What do you think about this football game? I think Georgia needs to get healthy and get healthy really quick if they're going to stand a chance in this game in Austin.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the lines of scrimmage, right? Georgia is obviously depleted along the offensive line. I don't know if Jared Wilson comes back and plays in this game. Drew Bobo's filled in his spot pretty well. I think he's played okay. Tate Ratledge not going to be able to go in this game, for sure. I think we're looking at him maybe in like a late November sort of comeback there. Sometime in November is probably the timeline for him to come back, and he's potentially the best interior offensive lineman in college football. I'd have him and Tyler Booker in there for that, but
Yeah.
nonetheless, weak on the offensive line. On the defensive line for Georgia, they did get some pieces back. Xavier McLeod played in the last game. I believe Warren Brinson is back, if I'm not mistaken. But we
Michael
know
Williams.
Michael Williams is back. Still without Jordan Hall in the interior of that defensive line, but they're healthier than they've been probably all season, really, for the most part. Maybe outside of the Clemson game. So that's good for Georgia, even with them coming back on the defensive line. I do think that Texas's offensive line has a clear advantage here. This is a unit that is performing at a Joe Moore Award type of level here. I think that they are finalists for that at this point in the season. So I give them the edge there. Georgia's offensive line against Texas's defensive line, I feel pretty good about what Texas has coming off the edges. The interior of the defensive line has played better than I expected them to play
Yep.
after they lose some pieces to the NFL there. But I do think that if nothing, this may be a wash for both teams along that side of the football. Maybe I lean Georgia a little bit, but they got to play a clean game, make no doubts about it. Georgia's wide receiver room, which is somewhat depleted now, with two wide receivers being kicked off the team, two of their biggest wide receivers being kicked off the team. No huge targets there on the outside now for Georgia, but against a Texas secondary that has kind of been revamped. That unit has not been tested yet. That there is
Yep.
still a big question mark on the secondary for Texas. I got to give the edge to Georgia at wide receiver. I think that Arian Smith is really coming on. He's put together two or maybe even three, back to back or back to back to back weeks of 100 plus yards receiving. That is really impressive for a Georgia team to do, for any player on a Georgia team to do. Dylan Bell, he goes down in the Clemson game, kind of has been working his way back from injury. It looks like he's back in good form. I think that he'll have a pretty good game this week. Dominic Lovett has been kind of MIA, really, considering we expected him to be the leading receiver for Georgia. He kind of really hasn't showed up for the most part. But I give the edge to the Georgia receivers, and I'll lump in the tight end room with that as well. It seems like Lawson Lucky has solidified himself as the leader of that group. Many thought it would be Oscar Dell, but it seems like Georgia has chosen to go with Lucky in that role. And then when you look at the Georgia running back room, while they aren't as good as they have been in years past, it does seem like Georgia has found something in Trevor Etienne. Um, he may be out there for 80% of the plays as running back. I mean, which is that has not been the case for Georgia in years past. I think until they get Roderick Robinson back, it's gonna be Trevor Etienne. Now Nate Frazier came in when Brandon Robinson or Branson Robinson, excuse me, went down last week against Mississippi State, and I thought Nate Frazier looked very explosive, looked very good, but he's a true freshman. Georgia is not going to want to keep him in the football game. He still struggles with pass protection. It's tough to put him out there and feel comfortable with him not to put the ball on the ground and to pick up blocks where he needs to. So to me, I think Trevor Etienne is your guy, but I give the advantage to the linebackers for Texas because Anthony Hill is an absolute stud. They've got a really good unit overall, and including the outside linebackers. I think that Texas has a clear advantage there. So I think Texas really on defense against Georgia probably wins that matchup overall. But it's about the matchups, right? If Georgia and maybe Georgia has been playing. You kind of led the beginning of the segment off, or maybe it was in our top 25, but you were talking about how much Georgia has had to pass the football as of late. Maybe they're preparing. Maybe they've been preparing for a Texas matchup that they knew they would have to rely on the passing game. Maybe they wanted to get Carson Beck some reps, kind of, get him going a little bit more than they have in the past, and it sets up nicely for this game against Texas to where maybe they have something that they can exploit. For Texas's offense versus Georgia's defense, I mentioned Texas's O line has an advantage against the D line. I think that Georgia's linebackers has a clear advantage over the running backs for Texas. This is another room that's been depleted, although Wisner has been playing great. I
Mm-hmm.
think Jaden Blue, if he's healthy, he's really, really good and really dynamic. He's been a little bit banged up as well. I like the freshman Jarrett Gibson. He's playing really well as a true freshman, kind of similar to Nate Frazier, I would say, as far as his explosivity and whatnot. I think he's an outstanding back. But Georgia's linebackers are legit. I mean, they've got, I think, 4 5 stars in that linebacking unit that play. That's not including I think they had 2 linebackers that came in as 5 stars, that are true freshmen that don't really get a ton of playing time. But Georgia's linebackers are absolutely phenomenal. They fly around the football. But as good as they are, if Texas is able to get the edge on Georgia, which a lot of teams have been able to do, running the football, then they're going to have some explosive plays, for Georgia, or for Texas, in the running game here. And it doesn't matter how good the linebackers are. If you got a running back speed versus a linebacker speed, which may be comparable, if they get the edge, they're getting 4 yards plus. So as good as the linebackers are, they're not going to go out there and win the football game, or anything like that. So to me, I think that the D line for Georgia has to step up. They got to find ways to win against a tough offensive line if they're going to keep Texas from running the football, which, as good as Texas is at passing the football, you got to take something away. So might as well be the running game, and then trust your DBs, which is a growing unit, I would say, against these wide receivers, which are very, very good for Texas. I mean, it's a clear advantage that Texas has, in their wide receivers going against Georgia's DBs. Although Georgia's DBs are very talented, they have not necessarily clicked and played cohesively, as a unit so far this year. So, I mean, everybody's got to step up on the defense for Georgia. I give the edge to Texas on the offensive side of the football versus Georgia's defense as well. So, on paper, it does seem like Texas should win this football game. I'm going to take a breath, let you talk for a minute, and then I'll give you my prediction so far, at least on a Sunday afternoon.
Well, I'm going to hold off on even giving my prediction today because I gotta sleep on this one a little bit more. But I mean, obviously, right now I'm leaning Texas. I mean, if you can't tell by the way I'm talking, I mean, Georgia's got some issues that they're working out. Georgia's played a way harder schedule than Texas has so far this season. I mean, that's no secret, and I think that's part of the reason that we've seen more cracks in the foundation for Georgia. And so you got to be careful not to overreact to what we've seen from Georgia or overreact to what we've seen from Texas, because all those games earlier in the season are going to make a hill of beans for this coming up Saturday. And I think it all comes down to Texas, their ability to be able to run the football in this game. I think you nailed it. That is what I'm focused on in this football game. I think Michael Williams coming back for Georgia is going to help on the edges. I think. I don't know. I don't know. We've barely seen him this season. I think he's going to be able to help with the edges a little bit, contain some things. And Georgia, the plays that they gave up against Mississippi State were plays where Georgia had no safety help and decided, all right, we're just going to go man press right here on the line. Let's go. Let's do it. And it was the same guy that beat our secondary multiple times. I feel like Georgia was working on stuff this past weekend. It really did seem like it. It seemed like it on the sideline. There was people getting talking tos from Kirby Smart that don't typically get talking tos. Kirby's gearing up for this game. I love Georgia whenever they're an underdog. That's really when I like to get behind Georgia. This front runner stuff, it's hard to be the front runner all the time. I mean, it really is, even though Georgia's done a great job at it over the last few years. Right now, I give the edge to Texas. I will say this. Texas hasn't been great kicking field goals this season. And I'm just going to throw that out there. 2 for 4 on field goals from 40 to 50 yards. That's 50% in my book, my Georgia public education there. And look, when you're talking about a game like this, that's a 3.5-point spread, a couple of missed field goals can make the difference in this football game. Georgia hasn't missed a field goal yet this year. Georgia's been pretty good at defending kickoffs. I think Texas has too. I'm going to dig more into the special teams aspect of things as the week kind of goes on. But I feel like that is something to note. Burt Auburn has missed a couple there from the 40 to 40 to 50-yard range. His career or his longest season's like 45 yards. So take that for what it's worth. A field goal can be a big difference in this football game, especially when you're talking about the spread being 3.5. Can Georgia stop the run? That's the biggest question for me in this matchup. You got anything else on this one? And first of all, or last of all, we're going to talk more about this game on Tuesday, 7:30 p.m. It's a call-in show. Call in. Come on and call in. Tell me why I'm wrong. I'd love to hear it, and I'd love to hear from Texas fans, Georgia fans, who's feeling good, who's not feeling good about this football game. We'd love to hear from you all at 7:30 p.m. on Tuesday night. You got anything else on this one, Mason, before we move to the next big game?
Well, I guess you're right. We're not supposed to give predictions at this point.
Give us your lean. Let's just don't. I just don't want anybody to think we're tied to this right now. We're not tied to this prediction.
No, y'all will have to come back on Tuesday and catch our prediction show. We'll give you our predictions. This game is going to play out very similar. I think the line is even the same as it was with Oregon and Ohio State. This is going to be a very good game. I do think that it's going to come down to who has the ball last, who plays well on special teams, who plays well on fourth down. There's going to be a lot of pieces, sort of ancillary pieces to the game that affect the football game. And I think that the winner is going to win those moments. So when it comes down to that, there's just no telling how this game's gonna play out. I'll say that, but I definitely think Texas on paper, matchup wise and everything, that they win at least on paper right now, and I'm definitely leaning towards Texas, which stinks, as a Georgia fan to say, but I feel like they've got a lot of momentum right now, and this game's being played in Austin. It'll be one of the biggest games in Austin in recent memory, and I think that crowd is going to have an impact on the game for sure. I like Texas in this matchup right now.
Let's jump into our next matchup. Hey, thank y'all so much for watching. If you haven't done it already, please hit the like button. Help us out. We're just trying to keep the lights on over here at First and Long College Football Show. And if you could help by hitting that thumbs up button, it is 100% completely free. And so with that being said, I'll go ahead and give you a money back guarantee on that. You can go ahead and hit the like button. If you're not satisfied, I will give you a 100% refund right after the show's over. You can just kind of wait there in the comment section, and I'll send you back over that $0 that you spent.
Very generous.
Well, I care about the people.
It's not coming out of the business budget, by the way. That's coming out of your own pocket. Just so you know.
Well, then I will get back to y'all next week. Your boy ain't got no money right now. All right, let's talk about this next matchup. Alabama at Tennessee. Alabama is a 2.5-point favorite. Over under set at 55.5. Does that make any sense to anybody? 55.5. Who has watched these offenses over the last couple of weeks? I mean, yeah, you could say Alabama's offense in the first half against Georgia looked really good. But I don't sit here and look at this and think, oh, wow, this one's going to be 35-31. I just don't. And I know that it's 55.5 and those don't add up. Okay, I'm not that dumb, but I'm just saying this doesn't seem like a game that's going to be high scoring to me. So immediately when I see this over under, I think under, because I think Tennessee's got a really good defense, and it's obviously a defensive-led football team at this point. Alabama, it's no secret what they're going to be trying to do. They're going to be trying to throw the football, and they're going to go over the top to Ryan Williams once every 8 plays. I mean, that's what this team does at this point. Now, Coach DeBoer is one hell of a scheme coach, one hell of a play designer. He's going to have something cooked up for this Tennessee defense, but look, I mean, I think the Tennessee defense is the best unit on the field in this football game, personally. Alabama's defense has averaged given up, like, if you take their last half against Georgia and you talk about the last couple of weeks against Vandy and South Carolina, they're averaging giving up a lot of points. Okay, so this isn't the defense that we're used to seeing. We talked about it early in the season, and look, I'm gonna, I'm not trying to put Texas down here, I got Texas on the mind. But early in the season, whenever we were breaking things down for the Alabama and Georgia matchup, we were looking at statistically for Alabama, defensively, what their statistics look like and where, the numbers say that they're vulnerable. And the numbers said that Alabama's secondary was one of the best ones in the country when we looked at it. You know why it said that? Because they had not played against anybody who could pass at all. So, with that being said, I just I don't know. What are your thoughts here? Because I just Tennessee can't throw the football, which is the weakness is the secondary of Alabama. It seems to me. I haven't seen Tennessee be able to throw the football very well this season. Um, where's the edge here for
So to
Alabama?
me,
I don't get
yes,
it.
Tennessee has struggled to pass here recently, but Dylan Sampson has continuously showed up to lead this team to victory. He was the only player that had touchdowns in the past week, and he scored 3 of them, including the game winner against Florida in overtime. So when I look at the Tennessee rushing attack, that has been very good, and I compare the game that we just saw Alabama play against South Carolina with Rocket Sanders really just going off in that football game. I look at the running game for Tennessee and I say that is an area that you could exploit Alabama in. The offensive line for Tennessee has been lackluster. I do like Alabama's defensive line for the most part, but it seems like Alabama's defensive line is getting better as games go on. So to me, if you're leaning on the running game, if you're Tennessee playing a hurry up offense but leaning on the running game, you could gas that defensive line for Alabama and make them a little bit less of a factor as the game goes on. On the other side of the football, though, Tennessee on defense is going to have to bring the house. I mean, they need to get pressure on Jalen Milroe. They need to contain the edges. But when you look at the defensive line for South Carolina, which I think is very comparable to Tennessee's defensive line, although the as far as just like their overall quality, I think that they're comparable to South Carolina. I think that South Carolina is better off the edges, particularly at getting to the quarterback and sacking the quarterback. They've got a little bit more speed off the edges, in my opinion. But James Pierce, coming off the edge, I think he's got to have a really big game for Tennessee, because what Tennessee really needs to focus on is, you know, when you look at the matchup, Tennessee is not as good on paper as Alabama as far as just the personnel and the roster. Alabama still has a superior roster. So, one way that you can affect that roster is by keeping that defense for Alabama out on the field for as long as possible, meaning you get 3 and outs against their offense, and you have long plays, long drives or you get a ton of possessions and you exploit the defense for Alabama. I think that that's Tennessee's game plan for success in this football game. And when you look at Jalen Milroe, when he's under duress, he makes mistakes, right? If he's under duress, he's more than likely going to run the football. And at that point, you got to have a good spy on him. Maybe Peely is your guy who spies Milroe. And maybe James Pierce coming off the edge. Maybe you do like a outside linebacker spy on each side. However you want to scheme that up, you just have to contain Jalen Milroe, and you'll win the football game. I think that's the easiest solution. When you look at Georgia in the second half of that football game against Alabama, they did a pretty good job of containing Milroe and limiting him with his legs and shut down the Alabama offense outside of one play, and it happened to be effectively the game winning play. But I feel like the book is out there on how to beat Alabama at this point. We've seen them struggle, like you said, for 10 quarters in a row now, and we've seen their offense really struggle for the most part. Tennessee just has to follow the game plan, follow the blueprint for what these teams have been doing for the past 10 quarters, and you'll have a chance to win this football game. You get this game at home at Neyland. It's going to be a crazy environment. I feel like Tennessee has a path to victory, but definitely feel uncertain about this game at this point, considering what we just saw from Tennessee against Florida, and what we saw again for Tennessee against Arkansas. I mean, I don't feel as good about this game as I did earlier in the season, picking Tennessee to win this game before the season got started. But you could say the same about Alabama too. I mean, both teams really have been, for the past two games, leaving you scratching your head as a fan, wondering what the heck happened to my team from week 5 and before. So a lot of questions here. It's kind of ironic that these two teams are facing at this point in the season, considering where both of them are at. I think they're two very comparable football programs, just from an overall power rating. But I like the home team in this one right now. At least that's my lane.
Well, okay, so here's my thing. So I'm just sitting here kind of mapping this out in my head as we go. This is the early thoughts portion of the week, guys. So these are not really polished thoughts that we have going off here. If you can't tell, we try to make them as polished as possible. But here's kind of the common thing that's gone on with Alabama the last couple of weeks. Diego Pavia, and Lenora Sellers both are mobile quarterbacks, and so I think what Tennessee probably needs to do in this football game is let Nico run the ball a little bit. Try to get the edge. And I'm not saying he needs to be trying to, lower his shoulder and hit people or nothing. But look, I mean, Nico's not a pocket passer. We part of those 10 quarters that we've seen Alabama struggle, especially defensively. 2 of those quarters were against Georgia, and Alabama was going against a pocket passer and Carson Beck. I don't think anybody at this point is ready to say that Nico, I am Olivia, whatever the hell his last name, Nico, Iamaliava. There we go. I had to remember how to say it. Is he a pocket passer like Carson Beck is at this point? I don't think so, man. And so to sit there and think that guy's going to be able to sit in the pocket and perform and bring Tennessee to a win, I'm doubting it. I'm just doubting it. I think you're going to have to be able to open your mind up a little bit and use Nico in some different ways. I mean, and I don't know who the backup quarterback is for Tennessee. I really don't. And I'm not calling for the backup. But my point is, if you run Nico and he gets a little boo-boo or whatever, I mean, that's just football at this point. What are you protecting Nico for? What are you saving him for at this point? I mean, you want to take care of the guy. You don't want to get him hurt. I understand. You love the guy. He's part of your team. I'm just saying he's not cutting the mustard at this point. So got to figure out a game plan in which Nico is part of that game plan to beat Alabama. And as of right now, in my head, I'm looking at Tennessee's offense, and he's not part of the game plan in my head. He's just really not part of the game plan. Right now, if Tennessee goes into this football game, just like they've gone into the last few, it's going to be run the football, run the football, run the football. Let's try to lean on this defense. And then by the end of the game, the dam breaks. And Tennessee's been able to run the football better in the second half than they have the first half. Nico's got to figure out a way to hit a pass downfield and back the defense up, first of all. And I think you've got to figure out another way to utilize Nico. Let him use his legs. How many people did we hear from in the beginning part of the season? It's like, wow, he's really shifty. He's really shifty for 6'6". He's got some moves. Doesn't really have the straight line speed. I mean, he's not like a 4-5 guy or nothing, but run. I mean, he's kind of like Taylor Green. He's got those moves left and right. I don't know. I think you got to figure out a way to utilize Nico a little bit better in this offense. It's been kind of a rough go the last few weeks. He's young. He's a first-year starter. A lot of that stuff is to be expected. But as far as winning this football game, Tennessee, their bread and butter has been running the football. I think Alabama obviously knows that. It's going to be tough sledding, especially early in this football game against that Alabama defense. We'll see if Tennessee can soften them up as the game goes on. But as far as Tennessee defensively against Alabama, I think I stand by what I said earlier in the season. I think Tennessee is one of the better equipped teams to stop Alabama. And now, the last couple of weeks, the best defense to stop Alabama was offense staying on the field. So if the offense is just going 3 and out, then you can scratch all of this, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's going to wear the defense out. But I think Tennessee can contain the edge way better than what Georgia did in the first half of that football game. And I think you're right. The key to slowing Alabama down is slowing Jalen Milroe down. Everything runs through that guy. Keep him in the pocket. Don't try to flush him out. That is exactly what they want to happen. They love for him to get on the run. He does his best work on the run, rolling out, on the move, getting out of the pocket. You've got to build a shell around him, keep him in the pocket, and get enough pressure to where your secondary isn't guarding people for 5, 6, 7 seconds. And I think that's kind of the recipe for slowing Alabama down. I'm leaning Tennessee. I'm sticking with Tennessee and the home team here. Alabama hasn't done anything over the last few weeks to prove that they deserve to be a favorite on the road at Tennessee in this situation. But then again, I see where Tennessee has kind of slumped the last couple of weeks, and I think that kind of is the reason for Tennessee being the home dog here. But I love those home dogs in these big matchups like this. I just bet on one yesterday with LSU being the home dog. I think I'm probably going to do it again with Tennessee. We'll have to see. We're going to break this game down further Tuesday night. We'd love for you guys to come and join us if you're seeing this clip elsewhere. This is your formal welcome to the First and Long College Football Show. Come on over and hang out with us. We'll be talking about this game on Tuesday. Mason, you got anything else on this one before we close this one out and go to the next?
No, that's about it. I'm also leaning Tennessee at this point, but we've got more research to do for our Tuesday show, and then we will solidify some thoughts and have some predictions out there for that one.
Absolutely. Hey, I appreciate y'all hanging out in the comment section. I certainly do appreciate y'all keeping us company. Let's see. Double O'Neill, what's up, brother? How's your bracket looking now, baby? Don't you worry about our bracket. Don't you worry about our bracket. No, I don't know. I think most of our bracket's still intact. I don't know. We're not going to bring the bracket back out until after Halloween, though. Double. Lawnmower Man, what's up, brother? 24 so far is one of the best seasons I can remember as a whole. If you mean better as in like more parity, I completely agree. I think the quality of play is the level of the quality of play I think is down overall. But who cares about that? We're all looking for parity, right? I mean, we're all looking for entertainment. So there's been less teams that look like an NFL junior team and more teams that have looked like college football teams, in my opinion. And in that case, I think that it has been really fun. And I think that has a lot to do with the transfer portal. I mean, look at some of the teams in our top 25. Indiana would have 0% chance of being in the top 25 without the transfer portal. 0. So, the transfer portal has really, really helped the smaller teams this season. And I think that's why we're seeing the spreads much smaller. The point differential is a lot smaller in some of these games. All right. We got to jump through some of these because I have to go. We got family dinner going on over at mom and dad's. So I've got to get on the road here shortly. So let's kind of jump through these quickly, Mason, and give our thoughts like super quickly. LSU at Arkansas.
Easier said than done, man.
Easier said than done. I'm gonna show you how it's done right here. All right. LSU at Arkansas. Arkansas, I like. Mason? No, I'm just kidding. Look, both of these teams are coming off of extremely high highs at this point. Arkansas, after being able to upset Tennessee at home, a big part of this football game for Arkansas is going to be whether or not Taylor Green is going to be healthy and whether or not Jaquindon Jackson is going to be healthy for this football game. So you Arkansas fans, I'd love to know from you. This is going to be an SEC matchup. We will be able to have our little injury report early in the week here. So we'll know, not early in the week, but midweek, we'll know who's out, for sure, or who's questionable, things like that. Still don't fully know who's playing game to game. We just, injury list or no. There's no penalty for not being 100% transparent on that. So for what that's worth, I guess you can look at the injury report. LSU is in one of those scenarios that I always look for as far as college football betting. And this is not our betting show. Our betting show's on Thursdays. So come join us for that. But LSU's coming off of a super emotional victory there at home against Ole Miss. I mean, that was they're probably still partying out there in Louisiana today. So um, Arkansas has had a bye week now. They've had the bye after the big. What a perfectly placed bye week for Arkansas. You go you host Tennessee, you win the big game, and then you've got basically 2 weeks to enjoy it and just wear that win and just feel it. Um, so I feel like Arkansas has probably been able to kind of move on from the extremely high highs of being able to beat a team like Tennessee at your own place. LSU, on the other hand, it's going to be really hard to keep everybody focused this week. And LSU's got a lot of issues at wide receiver that, we're going to have to see how that all shakes out this week. Lots of injuries. I feel like Chris Hilton is going to come back at some point. That'll be a big help. We'll just kind of have to see. Kyron Lacey obviously was out by the end of that football game last night. Aaron Anderson was a young guy who really had to step up. It's all coming down to Arkansas whether or not they make mistakes in this football game. Arkansas, and we proved it in the Tennessee game. Arkansas didn't turn the football over. I don't think. Maybe they did once, but not many times at all. I don't think they did at all against Tennessee. And guess what? They won the football game. If Arkansas doesn't turn the football over the first few games of the season, especially against Oklahoma State to start the season, they're undefeated. They are absolutely undefeated. Bobby Petrino has left a big mark on the Arkansas program already. And I'm talking about 2024, not the mark he left last time. But you may be watching your future head coach after Sam Pittman either retires or is pushed out. Right there, coaching the offense day in and day out. And I think he's just done a really, really good job. Bobby Petrino is an offensive mastermind. I don't know which way to go on this. Arkansas, like I said, if they don't commit turnovers in this football game, they got a damn good shot to win it. And this LSU Arkansas matchup, year in and year out, is pretty damn good usually. If Arkansas is at least like a 500 team or better, this is usually a pretty good matchup. As you know, most these teams played every year in the SEC West for years and years and years. What do you think about this matchup, Mason? I love the offense of LSU. I love the way that the defense is coming on here. But I could say the same thing about Arkansas. I loved a lot of what Arkansas's done all year, minus the turnovers. It was a big problem, and maybe they've turned a leaf. I don't know. Kind of a tough one to bet on with a team that turns the ball over a ton. What do you think about this matchup?
Well, I think that the timing of this schedule is perfect for Arkansas. LSU's just coming off of an emotional win against Ole Miss. They got a bye after their quarterback and their running back go out against Tennessee hurt. If I'm looking at the lines here, Arkansas, LSU is favored by 2.5 points. Over under set at 56.5. I think the line is perfect, assuming that Taylor Green plays and Jaquin Jackson plays, and they're both 80% or better. If either of those guys are out, I like LSU in this matchup. But the fact that this game is played at home for Arkansas, and like I just said, LSU coming off an emotional overtime win against Ole Miss, feeling themselves. I if either of those players are healthy, or both of those players are healthy, I think Arkansas can win this one. But there's a huge question mark over the status of those players with their injuries. To me, I think one of the most underrated aspects of this Arkansas football team is their wide receivers. I've been really impressed with Arkansas's wide receivers. I don't think that they get enough talk, so I'm going to bring them up on the show here and say that they could definitely be a factor in this football game. And then you look at LSU's defense; they've been getting better. If they play like they did against Ole Miss, it's going to be really tough to beat this LSU team for anybody. But do they regress back to the average, or do they continue that high level of defensive play, particularly on the defensive line? I thought we saw Harold Perkins really come out of his shell for the first time since 2022, and that could be a positive sign for LSU. So this one is definitely a head scratcher. I've got to do more research to figure out where I'm at. Tuesday I'll hopefully we'll know a little bit more about the injury status of Jackson and Green there, and also Chris Hilton for LSU and others. But right now, I mean, I think this game's kind of a pick 'em in my opinion. I would lean Arkansas in the points for that reason, but as far as who wins the game, I guess just assuming everybody's healthy, I would pick Arkansas at this point. But LSU definitely had figured some things out last week, and if they continue to replicate that outing and they show us that side of LSU, they can beat just about anybody left on the schedule. I think so. They're definitely a very dangerous program. I like where Arkansas is sitting, getting them at this point in the schedule, coming off of the bye week. This game's at home. A lot of that plays into factor here, with my opinion, and a very slight, like half a point Arkansas lean at this point on a Sunday afternoon.
I totally agree with you. We're going to have to watch the injury reports and see who can get healthiest this week. And that may lead us to be able to place a bet on our Thursday live show there called Between the Lines, our weekly betting show. And we've, of course, got our full preview and prediction on this game coming out Tuesday. So we hope that you guys will join us Tuesday evening for that. All right, let's do this last one real quick, and I got to get out of here. Nebraska at Indiana. Indiana's not a team that we talked about this year, guys, but we're getting to a point in the season where we got to talk about them. And I just have to say, I'm not going to sit here and act like I know a ton about Indiana football at this point, and I'm going to do some pretty serious digging on this week, because Indiana's been a team that's intrigued me so far this season, and I was quick to throw Indiana in the top 25 when I saw what they were doing. And earlier today I was getting ready to get on the show, and I was watching a Curt Cignetti interview from some of the people that work there on the Big Ten Network. And man, you talk about a buttoned up, just drill sergeant of a football coach. Curt Cignetti is that guy. And I am really, really impressed with this guy. The son of a former coach. His dad was a famous football coach from way back in the day. He literally grew up on the sidelines. Took a head coaching job at D2 school there. He came from James Madison and has totally revamped this Indiana program. And it was funny. I was watching this interview, and he was talking. He was being interviewed by this black guy and this white lady. They both work for Big Ten Network. I don't know their names, but I see them together on a podcast every once in a while. And they were talking about how they ran into Curt Cignetti at the Big Ten Media Days earlier this season. And Curt told them whenever they met earlier, in the preseason, he said, well, it's a good thing that I went ahead and came on out here, and figured out where Lucas Oil Stadium was, because this is where we'll be playing in December. And everybody laughed. Yeah, Indiana. Well, I'm not ready to say that they're going to Indianapolis this season, but I'm here to tell you right now that this is a completely different Indiana than what we've seen in years past. They went in the transfer portal, got a ton of senior-laden dudes. I mean, and we're going to come through this roster a lot deeper come Tuesday, so come join us for our Tuesday breakdowns at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, and that's every Tuesday, by the way, here on the First and Long College Football Show. But some of these guys that he got to come over are just veteran dudes through and through. Curtis Rourke is the quarterback. Guys, he has the number 1 QB rating, or excuse me, the number 2 QB rating in the country for this season. He is very, very good. And he is like probably just a few years younger than me. He's been around football for a long time, came over from Ohio. But I'm telling you, this guy's the real deal. Justice Ellison, another veteran-laden guy, is the leading running back for this team this year. Came over from Wake. Elijah Surratt is one of several wide receivers that have over 20 receptions this season. I was very impressed to go through some of their numbers and see they've got like 4 or 5 dudes in the wide receiver room with over 20 receptions. So not only they don't just have one dude that you got to cover. I mean, they're spreading the football around. And not to mention a guy that's really kind of an unsung hero on this offense. Zach Horton is a guy that's followed Cignetti over from JMU. He's a lot of he at certain times is the straw that stirs the drink on this offense. Does a lot of things that don't get on ESPN's top 10 or anything like that, but just a guy a guy that Signetti said plays the game the right way every single day. And this is a pack your lunch workman type football team, and they're going against one that is, I would say, the same thing, a workman like football team. Not, and I'm talking about Nebraska here now. Nebraska is not this big flashy toy. You know what I'm saying? They play solid football. They would love to be able to run the football, although there has been some issues at certain times being able to do that this year. I'm sure we're going to kind of touch more on that on Tuesday. Um, but going on the road here at Indiana, it can seem like an underwhelming process, but this, as I said, this is not your grandpa's Indiana here. I think Nebraska, where they've really developed in the passing game this season, I'm interested to see how they're going to keep up in this football game, man, because Indiana likes to score points and they like to score in bunches. Nebraska is going to have to be able to score some points in this football game, I think. 51 and a half set as the over under. Right now, I'm leaning over on that number. I think there's going to be some scoring here. And I think this is going to be a really super entertaining football game. What do you think about Nebraska at Indiana? We haven't taught Nebraska in a while because they haven't really played anybody since that Colorado game. So we kind of bring them back out from the shadows here to play Indiana. We talked about this Indiana game in the offseason like it was nothing for Nebraska. This should be an easy win. Here we go. We've got Indiana favored by 5.5 here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, just super impressed with the Hoosiers so far this year. Really like Signetti and what he's been able to do with this program. Like you said, this isn't a program we've talked about all season long. This isn't a program we've done a preview over all season long, and shame on us for not doing that. But I don't think we were the only ones here, covering college football that probably overlooked Indiana going into the season, like for good reason. It's Indiana; they're a basketball team, right? Or basketball school. Not this year. Indiana is really good. I'm excited to get into the numbers a little bit for our Tuesday full game breakdown, where we take a bigger look at both of these teams and kind of look for matchups and whatnot. But as of right now, man, I'm super impressed with Curtis Rourke and what he's been able to do. Guys are averaging almost 300 yards per game, 73.8% completion percentage. He's only had 2 picks on the year so far. Just really, really impressed with his numbers. The fact that he's been able to spread the football around. As you mentioned, 5 players with 20 or more receptions on the team. That's extremely impressive. And then too, they've been able to run the ball pretty effectively as well. They're 28th in the country, but over 200 yards rushing per game. That's a complete offense if I've ever seen one. And then you go to the defensive side of the football. And look at what Indiana has been able to do. They're 7th in the country, averaging in total yards, averaging 255.7 yards given up per game. 8th in the country in rushing yards, only giving up less than 84 yards per game. Passing yards, they're 25th in the country, giving up 171.8. So, I mean, this isn't TCU of 2022 where they're just winning close games and winning games that they shouldn't win and things like that. Guys, IU's for real. They very well could be in the Big Ten championship when it's all said and done if they keep playing at this rate. Now, this is kind of their first big test, I would say, so far
Yeah.
this season. You kind of have to take a little bit of this with a grain of salt, but going up against Nebraska, like you said, this is a very similarly built football program. Um, Nebraska has been known to wet the bed in some of these matchups. Here recently, not as much under Matt Rule. Although you may look at the Illinois game and say that some things could have gone different there in that football game, but nonetheless, I think Nebraska is kind of that team with a very veteran laden defense and an offense that is full of transfers and a freshman quarterback, and a couple of young players on the offensive side of the football that are doing some things as well. So when you look at the experience from IU versus I think a less experienced, although still fairly experienced, but maybe a slightly less experienced team in Nebraska, and then you just look at the absolute rampage that Indiana's on. I think I'm leaning Indiana at this point in the week. But like I said, Tuesday we'll comb through this roster. We'll have a much better formed opinion for you guys, and we'll give our predictions on Tuesday night as well. Really excited for this one. This isn't one that we had circled going into the season as a game that we should be talking about, but excited that this college football season has brought this to our attention because I think that this could be a banger this week.
Absolutely, man. Really looking forward to that one. That's it, guys. That's all our matchups that we're going to talk about today. We really do appreciate you guys coming and hanging out. Been a lot of fun commenting with you guys in the comments section. As I said, previews and predictions Tuesday, live betting show on Thursday. Both of those shows are live, by the way, and you can call in on either one. We always put a link in the description of the video. You're more than welcome to follow the link on a smartphone, laptop. We won't put your face on here. We're not going to put your full name or dox you or anything like that. Just have you on kind of like a phone call style. Would love to have you guys come and join us. For today, we're done. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you all Tuesday evening. Everybody have a great start to your week. See you soon.